Hi everyone, welcome to this battle report. I'm doing this as a trial run, kind of a proof of concept, to see if I can produce a video battle report that captures the feel of the old White Dwarf battle reports from the early 90s. That's why it's being played in Warhammer 5th edition. I'm going to use a top-down tactical map to show the full story of the battle and have photos to try and capture the feel of what was going on. Just like in the old White Dwarfs. Like I said, this is very much a trial run. There's many things which I can try and improve later once I've got the basics done. But if you have any comments that you'd like to see changed, then do comment below. Definitely want to try and make it as good as possible. So this is the third battle that Nathan and I have fought using these two armies, Chaos and Dark Elves. Or the fourth if you count a practice game that we had for learning the rules. Neither of us had played a long time before those games, so we've both adapted and improved our armies slightly as we've gone. Hopefully we'll be good for facing other armies, not just each other. And finally we played this particular game at Surrey Spartans Club. It was our first visit for both of us to that club. We normally play at a Hate Club in Bethnal Green. That's Hackney area tabletop enthusiasts. But thanks to Surrey Spartans for their hospitality and their welcome. They've got a great setup down there, and it was our first visit, so it was free, which is my kind of price. So the Chaos Army is my army. It's led by Kovor the All-Seeing. He's a Chaos Master Sorcerer on a Disc of Tzeentch, wearing Chaos Armor. The Helm of Many Eyes, which is a unique Chaos item, which allows him to strike first in combat. He's wielding a Chaos Runeblade and is protected by the Black Amulet. He's got a lieutenant, Delgor the Surprising, who's a Chaos Champion on a Disc of Tzeentch, carries a spear, and uses the Shield of Tolos so he can surprise some archers once in a while. It gives him a 1+ save against archery. The biggest or the most expensive unit in the army, not biggest, is 5 Chaos Knights. Normally I bring Marauder Horsemen that I really like. They've got really fantastic speed and maneuverability, which makes them a very proactive unit. But they're stuck on the painting table, so I'm using these Chaos Knights for the first time. They're backed up by Kovor's Rocks. They're a unit of 16 Chaos Marauders. They've got flails, light armor, and a shield, and a Chaos Warrior to lead them. Got 2 packs of Chaos Hounds, Fangs pack and Runes pack. They have been great for me. They've done a lot of good work. They act as a screen, get in the way of things. They've been really helpful. I added the Talons not long ago. That's 5 Harpies. They're really necessary for an army like this to give it a bit more responsiveness to missile fire, which is something that Chaos armies don't have themselves. And the final unit here is Detwiller's Lads. I'm down to 3 Ogres for this battle, mainly so I can actually include those Chaos Knights from above. Now the main thing I really want to try and achieve in this game is to make good use of my Marauders. They've only got a movement of 4, so they're going to need to deploy centrally and try and march as much as possible to hope they can really get involved. And in our practice game that Nathan and I had, his War Hydra and his Crossbowmen have been really, really devastating. So I've really got to make sure that I respond to his War Hydra and his missile troops in this game. Nathan once again brought his Dark Elf army. It's Nathan's Army of Vengeance. It's led by his General Nathan and Noswill. I had to come up with a name. There you go. Maybe it'll stick. Maybe Nathan will change that. Now, the scariest part of Nathan's army is definitely his War Hydra, Severus the Confused. I've been a bit mean on the name I've given it there. You'll see why. Now, it has a flame attack, though, and combined with its combat prowess, it can just rip the gut out of an army in moments. So if I get the right spells, my general might be able to deal with it, but if not, I'm going to have to either avoid it or make sure I attack it en masse all in one go so I can wipe it out quickly. Now, even though it's an absolute brute, it's a bound monster, so it's prone to missing turns here and there. That means I might be able to avoid it. He has a Sorceress, normally level 3, so the dark magic there can be pretty devastating. That's something which I've experienced in previous games. So far, his cold ones in general have found it just as tough to get into combat as my Marauders, so I'm sure he'll be keen to get them involved. Nathan's bringing I'm expecting him to bring a hero and a Dark Pegasus. Made an appearance in the previous game. Threw himself right into the fray, hoping for a glorious death. It turned out he had the Heart of Woe, so if that thing explodes, it will rip the heart out of my army just as easily as the War Hydra. Finally, there's a missile threat. I think he's going to have a little bit less of that than in some games. But with double firing from those repeater crossbows and great ballistic skill, those units can be really, really harmful. Okay, apart from that, he's got the 5 Harpies, which tend to fill a similar role to mine. But let's move on a bit. We've been working through the missions in the 5th edition battle book, so we're going to be playing the flank assault mission this time, largely because the surprise assault mission offered nothing except disadvantages for Nathan, so we decided to go to one that would actually change things up a little bit. That meant he had to deploy at least 500 points in reserve, and they wouldn't arrive until the start of turn 3, when they'd appear on a flank of his choice. Now, because of the numbers and the way his list work out, it meant that he had no real choice other than to send his general and cold ones off onto a flank. So he did that, and then afterwards we started deploying using alternating deployment. First of all, I put my Harpies centrally. That meant that with their higher movement and ability to fly, if I found they were in the wrong place, I could easily redeploy. And Nathan matched that by doing something very similar with his own Harpies. I put down one of my packs of dogs, Fang's pack, just to the side of the woods, and they were going to act as a screen to soak up missile fire. Nathan put his War Hydra centrally. Being a bound monster, it would only be moving 6 inches per turn. So by having it centrally, it had more flexibility of who to target. My other unit of dogs, Rune's pack, went to the other side of the woods, and Nathan's crossbowmen lined up with my left flank between the woods and the building. Now, my main concern was to try and deploy my Chaos Marauders, Kovor's Rocks, centrally behind one of those units of hounds and push forwards with as rapidly as possible. So far in 4 games against Nathan, they've barely swung a weapon at their enemies, so I put them as centrally as I could, hoping that later in the game something would charge them and regret it. Now, Nathan's heroes had to deploy, and they did so pretty centrally. It was a good position for his hero on the Dark Pegasus to make an early charge, and then my unit of ogres, Detwiller's lads, deployed behind the other unit of dogs. I put the Thunder Lances, that's my Chaos Knights, opposite the crossbowmen. With only a strength of 3 on those crossbows, they can't even get through the barding, so it might be fairly devastating if I can get a charge off on those guys and use that to my advantage. Finally, having seen where Nathan had deployed everything else, I put Kovor the All-Seeing with his unit of rocks, the Marauders, and I sent Delgor the Surprising to the centre, from where he could try and surprise just about anyone. Finally, after deployment was all but done, Nathan put his scouts just out of sight behind a hill on his left flank, ready to pop up and plink my brave psychopaths full of holes. Now, after deployment, I rolled for my Chaos Gifts. I won't go through them all now, but I picked up 7 of them. 2 of them were not going to apply in this battle, but I did play Mutations on my Chaos Marauders, which gave them a weapon skill of 5, and might help if they get charged by cold ones later or anything like that. Nathan had the first turn, and in that Dark Elves first turn, his crossbowmen and scouts moved forward slightly so they could get in range with their repeater crossbows. That meant they could only fire once, but that was still better than not firing at all. His Harpies and his hero on the Pegasus moved forwards, ready for charges the following turn. And his Hydra moved forward as well, menacingly. I was already worried about how much damage it could do to me, to my dogs, my Marauders, my Knights, everything really. With a strength of 7, based on the fact that its flame weapon strength is based on its remaining wounds, it could really do a lot of damage. Now, he opened up with the crossbowmen and the scouts, but their shooting was pretty appalling. They really let him down with their accuracy there. One of Fang's pack was killed, but apart from that, I came out pretty unscathed. Surprisingly, to me, at the end, when we did the magic phase, his only sorcerer jumped using the Witch Flight spell from the Dark Magic deck. popped up behind my knights, and he tried to cast Soul Drain at them. Fortunately, I had drawn Wrath of Khorne as one of my Chaos Gifts, and I used that hoping to not only dispel that, but also, if I was very lucky, to potentially destroy that spell. So I was successful in dispelling, but wasn't able to get the spell destroyed. So it's something I was going to have to watch out for the rest of the game. Overall, at the end of Dark Elves turn 1, I was fairly happy with how things had worked out. I've had far worse turn 1s before. In my first turn, I decided it was going to be really important just to go forward as rapidly as possible. So obviously with both my units of Chaos Hounds, Fangs Pack and Runes Pack, they just went forward as much as possible, getting pretty much halfway onto the board there. Following them, Detwiller's lads went round behind Runes Pack, and the Chaos Marauders, with their meagre 8 inches of movement, tried to pursue, carry on behind the Hounds there, and Kovor moved along with them. My Chaos Knights were a bit more cautious. They really didn't want that Hydra to zip forward and use its flame weapon on them. So for now, they're hanging back, ready to make a charge later. I did try and charge Nathan's scouts with both my Harpies and with Delgor the Surprising. Unfortunately, the surprise was for me because they fell just short. But there was some really good news, is that Nathan decided to fall back with his scouts. And they rolled a very impressive 11 if they'd actually needed to escape, because my Harpies did fall about 3 or 4 inches short anyway. Left my Harpies in a slightly vulnerable position, but wasn't the end of the world. At least I made the scouts react to me rather than just leaving them there to start shooting next turn. At the start of turn 2 for the Dark Elves, the worst possible thing for Nathan and the best possible thing for me happened. Nathan's War Hydra failed its bound monster roll and started heading back towards its own lines. That was great for me, as not only did it mean it would not get to breathe fire on me this turn, it left a large gap in his line of advance. It's to be expected that this sort of thing might happen, but Nathan has been very unlucky with his leadership roles for his War Hydra. Not just in this game, but previously too. It's a beast, but it's unpredictable, hence that name I gave it, Severus the Confused. Elsewhere, Nathan's Harpies charged mine in the rear, but the same thing happened to Nathan as it had to me. They fell just short, which was another break I really needed. His hero, though, made it directly into combat with my knights. Nathan's shooting was fairly ineffective again, but his hero on the Pegasus in combat was able to kill a knight. They fought back, and I targeted his Dark Pegasus steed because I was fully expecting him to be carrying the Heart of Woe again, and that would wipe out most of a 400-point unit single-handed. The Pegasus died, and the hero would be on foot for the rest of the game. I was really hoping at this point that the hero would fail his leadership role so that my knights could charge him down, and that'd be a much more effective way of killing this hero, as his Heart of Woe would not then trigger, but he passed his leadership test. Now, the Winds of Magic didn't do much for either of us, and not a lot happened in the magic phase there, so it was time for Chaos turn 2. In Chaos turn 2, Fang, now alone with the rest of his pack dead, charged at the crossbowmen. That was just pointless. He had no chance of surviving their standard fire, and he was killed. Elsewhere, Rune's pack charged Nathan's Harpies, hitting them in the flank and doing just enough damage to see them fail their leadership and flee. Delgor the Surprising killed off some scouts over there on the right-hand side of my battle line, made the rest of them flee, pursuing them off the edge of the board. He only just avoided leaving the board himself. He then hung around, ready for Nathan's General and Cold Ones to arrive. Probably not going to work out well for him. Detwiller led his lads forward, anticipating the return of the War Hydra. The Chaos Marauders plodded on, unable to march due to that pesky hero next to them. Even when he doesn't die and set off the Heart of Woe straight away, he really helps reduce my forward's movement. And in each game, either the hero or Nathan's Harpies have done something similar, really messing up my plans. The Chaos Knights couldn't go anywhere because of that same hero, but they also seemed unable to actually deal with him and finish him off. I suppose at least it meant he wasn't exploding and killing them, but again, he passed his leadership role and stuck around, getting in the way. With the War Hydra threat gone for a short while, Kovor the All-Seeing went to deal with the threat of the Sorceress behind my lines. He cast Pink Fire of Tzeentch, which only has a 6-inch range, but does d6 hits at d6 plus 4 strength, and he killed that sorceress dead. I was gutted when moments later she reappeared in Nathan's deployment zone, as he was holding the escape card from the magic deck. Still, at least she wasn't right behind my army anymore. In the third Dark Elves turn, the War Hydra passed its bound monster roll, and it went round behind the woods where it could breathe some fire on my Chaos Hounds. Most of them died as a result of that. Just one survived, leaving Rune on his own. More importantly, General Nathan Noswill arrived with his unit, Vengeance Served Cold, the Cold One Riders. The General himself charged into Delgor the Surprising. Neither of them actually took a wound. They were both fortunate to be protected by their armour and various ward saves in the case of the Dark Elf General. The Cold One's unit advanced across the table, ready to make a charge in turn 4. The sorceress who'd returned using the escape card moved up the table, hoping to join the crossbowmen, who were now whittling away at the marauders. They took some casualties as they only have toughness 3 and a 5+ save. The hero who had been on the Pegasus took out another Chaos Knight. They wounded him in return but could not kill him, so the fight continued. I chose not to lap around, as it would have meant they were more of them attacking him and making him more likely to die, and in turn them to die to the Heart of Woe if I successfully killed that hero. I was still hoping that I could win the round due to my banner and musician for him to be unlucky on a leadership test, so I could run him down instead and make sure that Heart of Woe did not trigger. Magic had little effect on this turn. It's becoming a theme through the battle. In the third Chaos turn, Detwiller's Ogres decided, and I think quite rightly, that discretion was the better part of valour, and they didn't want to be charged by the Cold One Knights. They legged it away from them towards my general. I figured that way they'd benefit from his leadership, and even if they were killed, the Cold Ones would regret pursuing into my Marauders due to Kovor lurking there with his helmet of many eyes. The Chaos Marauders therefore moved in just behind them. My Harpies charged his crossbowmen in the flank, anticipating an easy win and hoping to cause an unfortunate leadership failure. Instead, Nathan revealed that the unit was harbouring an assassin. My Harpies suffered a rather undignified defeat. Nevertheless, they passed their leadership test and stayed in that fight. The fight between the Thunderlances and the formerly Pegasus riding hero continued in a stalemate. Over on the far flank, Delgor the Surprising only survived by using his Gift of Tzeentch to re-roll a saving throw, which came as quite a surprise to Nathan, the Dark Elf General. In return, Delgor kept battering at Nathan Noswill and finally caused a wound despite the General's armour and ward saves. Magic, again, was ineffectual. The winds were low and Kovor's low power spells had a very short range. In the fourth Dark Elves turn, I felt like I had the edge, but a bad turn could still have sent Kovor's plans tumbling into oblivion. His Cold One Knights charged Rune, my one remaining Chaos Hound. I decided to flee rather than give away a victory point. It did mean that his Cold Ones would charge their full distance, but not if by some miracle the Hound survived to be able to get a charge and then pursue again. That would have given them a lot more movement towards my lines, and I did not want that as my Ogres were still facing the wrong way. Elsewhere, his Sorceress joined the unit of crossbowmen, and his Hydra swung back the way it had just come, back round behind the woods, trying to get back into the fray. The crossbowmen continued to plink away at the Marauders. My Harpies, who had surprisingly stuck around after encountering the assassin last turn, now fled straight back towards the Cold Ones. Uh-oh. Nathan's General and Delgor the Surprising remained locked in a stalemate, with neither wounding the other. That was mainly good for me, as a cheapish hero was holding up quite a powerful model and making sure he would not be able to get across the board to get more involved in subsequent turns. I think Nathan expected to deal with my champion in short order, but Delgor was doing surprisingly well. Nathan's hero, now on foot, continued to fight my knights, but it was another stalemate. The banner meant that the Thunderlances won the combat, but the hero resolutely stood his ground. Magic, again, was unimpressive. Chaos turn 4 seemed quite crucial. I played Eternal Battle. It's a Chaos gift that means both sides can return slain troops to one unit. Unluckily for Nathan, he had no eligible units, but I regained one of my Chaos Knights, bringing them back up to 4. Detwiller's lads turned to face the approaching Cold One charge. The Marauders, with Kovor, were close behind to soak up the pursuit if it happened. My Harpies strangely seem to vanish from the battle at this point. They aren't in the photos that I took, and I have only the vaguest memory that they rallied and went somewhere to hide to avoid giving points away. But they shouldn't have moved if they rallied, so I'm really confused. Possibly the Hydra flamed them last turn, and I just forgot to write that into the report. Certainly they weren't in my dead pile at the end of the game, but perhaps they should have been. Bit of a mystery. There was finally a breakthrough in the fight between the Thunderlances and Wynath Ansau, former Dark Pegasus rider. My knight still failed to take the hero's last wound, thankfully, but he lost his nerve and legged it. The Thunderlances not only rode him down, but rolled high enough to hit the line of crossbowmen who'd just driven off the Harpies. I was slightly surprised when they stood their ground, but it availed them nothing as several of the elves were ground into the dirt under the Thunderlances' hooves. The elves fled, but the knights were clearly exhausted from their exertions and could only pursue 6 inches on 3d6, whilst the elves ran 11 inches on 2d6. On the far side, Delgor, quite surprisingly, reduced the Dark Elf General to 1 wound, but still could not quite finish the job. And you guessed it, nothing really happened with the magic. By this time, we thought we were going to run out of time, and we didn't want to offend our hosts and new club by playing on for too long and making them wait for us. We decided to talk through quickly what we would each do, make a few key dice rolls, and mutually decide on a winner. In another burst of bad luck, the War Hydra, Severus the Confused, see where that name came from, failed his bound monster roll again. Had he passed, he would, despite his earlier bad roll, have been able to make it across to breathe fire on my knights. Crossbowmen rallied, but there was very little they could have done to affect the game at this stage. The Cold Ones could possibly have charged the Ogres, but it would have been a bit of a stretch and might have left them very vulnerable. In response, I decided that my knights would, if they were still intact, have either finished off the crossbowmen or charged the Hydra, thereby reducing its wounds. I might have been able to eliminate the threat of its breath weapon even if they could not kill it, although this was turn 5 and we had only rolled for 5 turns. If I was able, I would have charged the Cold Ones with my Ogres, and Kovor himself would have moved out of the Marauders squad, ready to do some casting on that War Hydra, hoping to finish it off, or if not, do some casting at the Cold Ones if the Knights had already dealt with it. Delgor and General Nathan were effectively a side game at this point, so far off on the flank. The winner of their little fight was anyone's guess, and we didn't do any dice rolls for that one. Have no idea what happened to my Harpies. I'm starting to suspect they were killed. At the end of turn 4, Chaos was leading 5 victory points to 1 victory point. We'd only lost 1 unit of dogs, and I'm pretty sure those Harpies were destroyed at that point. The Dark Elves didn't hold any table quarters either. Chaos had suffered a lot of losses, but nothing shattering. If turn 5 had played out, we might have seen the Knights destroyed, but more likely at least 1 or 2 had survived. But that could have been 4 victory points if they'd died. Taking out the crossbowmen would have given me 1 victory point, I assume possibly 2, not quite sure how much they cost Nathan. Had I been able to kill the Hydra, that would have been 3 victory points, but that was a bit of a stretch. If Delgor had been killed, he was only worth 1 victory point, whereas he had been whittling away at the Dark Elf General and had at least a chance of getting me 2 or 3 victory points there. Now, overall, we decided it was a Chaos victory. Certainly that seemed like the most likely outcome. There's quite a few discussion points from the game. First of all, I think the War Hydra failed its leadership in probably the most critical turn of the game for it. And not only failed it, but legged it backwards towards its own table edge rather than standing and struggling. If it had even stood and struggled, it would probably have been a very different game. But by running backwards, it meant it would only have a peripheral effect on the rest of the battle. Whilst I'm terrified of that War Hydra, and I really have to plan much of my strategy around it, I'm beginning to think it's probably too unreliable for 1500 point games. It's just too swingy. Nathan and I are hoping to play a 2000 point game soon, and I think it might be less of a problem if it fails one of its leaderships in a game that big. Also critical was the fact that the hero fled rather than dying, so his Heart of Woe did not explode. If the Chaos Knights had died, that would have been 4 victory points on their own. Even killing a couple of them would have left them vulnerable to magic or maybe the Hydra. That's 2 games in a row now that his Heart of Woe hasn't triggered, and 2 games in a row that the War Hydra has really let him down. Hard to say what you could do instead, because the hero on the Pegasus still had a big effect on the game anyway by keeping those Marauders held up, so I don't think you should take that out. But he's got to start hoping for some good luck that it'll actually trigger and do its job. Finally, Nathan's Cold Ones might have had more impact if we'd reached turn 5. The flank assault really hindered them rather than helping. I think there might be a lesson in there somewhere. Nathan's tended to deploy his Cold Ones fairly centrally, and maybe if they started on a flank, they would be able to get in position to start doing what they need to do in a much easier way for future games. I'm still not sure how to get the most out of my own Marauders. They can't be ignored, that's for sure. And so the fact they force my opponent's hand in some ways mean they're not a complete waste of space, but I really want to see them reach combat. I only used the Knights in this game because my Marauder Horsemen were on the painting table, and I'm not sure they're really that useful in a game of this many points. They need more attractive targets to charge into. But that's despite the fact they didn't, as the saying goes, earn their points back, they did force Nathan to respond with his hero on the Pegasus. And once they made a breakthrough, they did well to move up the table towards his crossbowmen. Detwiller's Ogres did very little in this game, but just having that block of high toughness, high wounds models in the centre of my table feels reassuring. I think they need some high leadership when the shit hits the fan, but that's why Kovor is so mobile, so he can move around to where his leadership is most useful. Delgor the Surprising has been a real game changer since I added him to the army. I seem to have stumbled on a great little unit. He has Chaos Armor with the Shield of Tolos, which means that 3+ of his armor save is magical for when that matters. Overall, his save is 2+, increasing to 1+ when I get the relevant Chaos gift, and even when I don't, the Shield of Tolos always gives him a 1+ save against missile fire. And finally, by giving him a spear, he hits at strength 6 on the charge, and with 3 attacks, he can be pretty devastating against the right unit. Like I said, this was a fun game. I'm looking forward to playing against this army again, and using my own army again. Nathan really deserves some luck in a game coming up soon. And I think when he gets it, I'm going to find that things turn out really badly for me. Thanks again to Surrey Spartans, who were our venue for this game, and hopefully I can produce another battle report like this and put in plenty of good photos and stuff like that if I can get this one working on YouTube. Okay, bye everyone, hope you enjoyed that.